there? Welcome to the channel, RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and today, as we do all week, we are going to take one subject and deep dive into it for at least an hour. This week, our subject is volcanoes, and today is Third Pillar Thursday. Now, what does Third Pillar Thursday mean? Well, the third pillar of tabletop role-playing games is the pillar of exploration, with combat, social interactions being the first and second pillars. For me, the third pillar of exploration is not just about going into unknown lands, but it's also about using the environment, as the third leg of the table. It's the triangle. It's the great equalizer, and I feel it is the atrophied muscle in the tabletop RPG community that we can really use and really get it kick-started so that we have some memorable and some creative ideas in our settings. Okay, so what does that have to do with volcanoes? Well, it's pretty apparent, right? We've have talked and will talk about things like lava flows and poison gases and gouts of flame and earthquakes and rock slides and acid rain and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to bring up some things, and this is more or less a mechanical aspect of flavoring our very narratively based setting, right? Player characters are traveling into, the nine hells. Your setting is one that's been blasted by the gods after a vast war, and the world is torn, or there's been a sundering between the elemental realms, and the player characters are traveling to that part of your world where the plane of earth and fire and maybe even darkness or whatever has just ravaged the landscape. And you really want to make it, for me, not just a narrative effect, but you want it to have an effect on mechanically in the game, so that you're allowing your players to this is a weird way to say it, kind of bad, but you want your players to set themselves up for their own harm. Okay, and this is why when it comes to, for me, when the third pillar of exploration involves like obstacles, layers, puzzles, riddles, traps, the whole nine yards, all mixed together into one unit that you can turn the dials on up and down so that your players have something to encounter. An example of would be, and I've brought this up before, about my dislike of traditional traps and how the environment works to your benefit as a game master or dungeon master. And the first part is where it works to your benefit is foreshadowing. Okay, you absolutely positively, yeah, I'll talk about, I'll bring up that part, Omen. Yeah, you can participate in the Discord chat over at Fantasy Grounds College, or on YouTube, or even on Twitch. Hey, Kitty, yeah, you're on camera, or at least audio. The idea is that foreshadowing allows you, as the game master or dungeon master, to place in front of your players the dangers that they're going to encounter. Now, it's pretty easy if you say, hey, there's a dragon up in that mountain, and the player characters go, dragon? Hey, don't dragons breathe something, and they're big and powerful and blah, blah, blah? So they know the danger they're going to get into. The problem, the, I'm on Twitch. I'm strange, that dead man, but or at least I see myself on Twitch. I'm not sure why I'm not broadcasting there. Not certain. All right. The other aspect of that the environment allows you to do is, sometimes it can be very difficult for us as game masters and dungeon masters to fully describe what it is that the players are about to engage in. And when you have something that is extremely close to a commonality of experience or knowledge or information, the better it is. So for example, in our modern context, if you describe a firearm, other people, whether they've touched firearms, they've seen them on television and in movies and in military and whatnot, they understand what a firearm is. You don't have to describe how it operates and what it looks like and things like that. When the player characters walk into a man-made dungeon and you make them roll to fall into a pit trap they don't see, it feels like a gotcha, right? You didn't foreshadow that there might be a trap. Yes, I understand the trap's not supposed to be known, but it also means that they are unprepared for it, and you might be creating a situation where the players are now on the lookout for the gotchas, and you can create analysis paralysis where they're literally they see one trap and now they're over analyzing the entire game, and you're just like, oh, just move ahead, and you're spending 4 hours a session per session for like 5 weeks, moving down a simple hallway or something like that. There's also the idea of the psychological effect of your players thinking that you're constantly trying to get them, as opposed to telling them up front, hey, guess what? There's a lot of danger up here, and here's what's going to happen. And the natural environment, as well as many man-made environments, really lead to that, right? Not much difference between player characters going into a volcanic region where you explain to them that there's gouts of flame and poison gases and clouds of smoke and falling debris and flaming embers and that kind of thing in front of them, the same as if the players went into, say, a dwarven foundry or something, and there's like hot ore being poured from buckets in the ceiling, and there are conveyor belts, and there's furnaces and piles of ore and mine carts dumping tons of rock to be smelted and things of that nature. You're explaining the environment. Now, the same is actually done in many ways when you're, say, watching some of your favorite action movies and books and things. And I am a action movie fanatic, and I love the making of movies, and I love watching them too. And a lot of times, if you are a director, a good director will foreshadow certain things. So, for example, the main characters go into a volcanic region, and they'll show you images of, hot molten lava blasting from the top surface of this mountainous volcano. They'll show you lava flows. They'll probably even show you innocent people or criminals or whatever being harmed and or killed by the things around them. In other words, to reinforce to the watcher and to the main characters, like, yeah, this is pretty dangerous, and that's actually a good thing. So for me, the environment is one in which it's a very easy way for you to describe to your players, like, before you start getting in a lot of these fights, here's something that's going to happen. Here's some other dangers you might need to watch out for. And then it alleviates the pressure of having to describe what the hell's going on, because just before we started this broadcast, Tesla Ranger put in a link to instanthawaii.com, where it talks about volcano cautions and warnings, and puts into National Geographic. It talks about volcano safety tips, preparation readiness. Guess what? One simple click, boom, the information's out there. PCs know, I know, DM knows, whatever. So now, getting more specifically with volcanoes, because we talked about this earlier, is that you can set up your volcanic regions mechanically in a lot of different ways. Now, one of them is static. I talk about static environments, random, escalating environments, just like there's different types of combat, like ranged combat, close combat, melee combat. You can add spells in there if you want to. You can add unarmed combat and grappling, social interactions. There's persuasion, threats, deceptions, performances, and things of that nature, seduction, carousing. Those are different things. But what about the environment? So static environments mean basically it means what I'm saying. So you overlay over wherever the players are at, or a specific part of your battle map or region or something, some kind of static effect, whether it's heavy smoke reduces visibility, whether there's choking gas. That's more or less dynamic environment. But other static effects would be narrow locations to walk. So if they have to walk through a narrow crevice, maybe they have to duck down if they're crawling through some kind of cave entrance or something. Maybe there is reductions in visual distances, not just through like smoke or fog or steam, but just because there's a lot of rocky outcrops or plateaus or pillars of rock standing. So your visual distance is shortened. There might be enemies hiding behind like rocks and blasted areas or something. And then of course there's the simple idea of, you know, narratively speaking, there could be a lava flow that's like a lava river, and it prevents you from literally walking from one place to another. You might have to figure out how to cross or move forward or downwards from the flow to find a much more narrow area to cross. So, and those are static things, and you can overlay static things. They work, but they're not as dynamic for me. Now, a dynamic environmental hazard is something like choking gases or smoke, something where the players may need to divert some of their attention to what's going on, and that will change their tactics. Maybe both for the NPCs and the PCs, or if there's creatures adapted to it, it's just the PCs. So an example would be a dynamic location might be there's hot lava spewing out of the volcano, and it's coming crashing down in their region. And so does that mean they might have to make saves to avoid being smacked in the head? Does that mean that a player character may try to find shelter or run out of the area because they're afraid of getting pelted in the head? Maybe there's gases spewing out of the ground like a geyser, and they don't want to get knocked out or poisoned or choked to death or something. Maybe there is lava flowing extra fast after the ground shakes, and does the archer stand on the rocky outcrop to fire at their at fleeing bad guys, knowing that if the lava flows around their location, that they're going to be trapped on this little small island of rock, as opposed to climbing down first? And letting the players make that kind of choice, for me, using the environment is the kind of thing that I think benefits us as a tool. Now, making those choices, and this is where puzzles come in, right? You can get online and look up a ton of different types of physical puzzles, and then the mental puzzles kind of head towards the riddles, right? And having a puzzle with only one answer sucks, because a lot of times those puzzles are attached to closed doors, literally and figuratively. And you really don't want to do that. You want to have a puzzle that can be answered with multiple answers. Or in other words, you want to put the problem in front of the PCs and then put the problem in front of them and let them come up with the solution. So if you have a river of lava and the PCs need to get from one side to the other, don't create a situation where there's only one way to do it. Let them come up with it. Does that mean that they're going to find a tree and try to knock the tree over and hope that when the tree falls in the lava it starts to burn, but they're going to try to run across it before it burns and sinks into the lava? Are they going to try to cause some kind of landslide or avalanche to have the rock flow over top of the lava, at least temporarily? Are the players going to use some kind of spell effect or technology or something? Will one or two players try to jump across and try to find something on the other side to bring back with them? Whatever the case might be. Hey, I'm going to put my shield down, and then someone else can ride on my shield and want to attach a rope to it and drag it across. It doesn't matter, right? You set up the problem. PCs need to answer come up with a solution, and it's up to you as the game master or dungeon master to adjudicate the solution, but not necessarily say, well, there's only one way to get across, and that's to knock over that big pillar of stone. The idea of knocking a tree over is stupid. I'm not going to let you do it. That's not what you want. Also, by using the environment, and this is kind of like how the sausage is made, because the environment is used so little in tabletop role-playing games, both by the designers and therefore by the people who use the games. Action economy becomes a problem. So action economy is the idea that you have, say, 4 player characters against one bad guy. So the bad guy gets to act once, and then the player characters get to beat this individual upon the head and shoulders because they get to act 4 times. It's a real thing, right? If one person gets jumped in an alley by 4 people, the one person gets to act. They are one individual. 4 other individuals get to act, with a force multiplier of 4, and so it's very easy for multiple player characters to lay the smackdown on one bad guy. Now, of course, you can add extra minions and other individuals into a lot of these combats, but eventually, when one or more of the acting individuals falls, the force multiplier increases. So if the bad guy has 3 henchmen and there's 4 against 4, the minute a player character takes out one of those henchmen, it will start, the tide will turn. There's nothing wrong with the PCs winning. That's the whole point. But again, force multiplying. But the environment is something that can be used to not only affect the player characters, but can affect their choices and mitigate some of the action economy. So, for example, that archer that wants to shoot the bad guys, and that archer is pretty deadly, may have to reconsider shooting their arrow if they know they're going to be trapped on an island of rock that's slowly getting eaten away by the hot lava, right? So now it's not a matter of, hey, I'm going to shoot my arrows and just kill everything around me. It's, I'm going to have to run for cover, or I'm going to have to, grab the fighter's shield that he left me to protect my head from falling debris, or I really need to get out of this field of gouts of flame or poison gas seeping out of the walls or the ground or whatever, because if I pass out, I can't shoot these people, so I'm going to run somewhere else or whatever. I'm going to run for cover and hide as the enemy comes strolling across this dangerous landscape with gouts of flame or something, because maybe that might benefit my PC. And so now you have other options involved in it. Now I'm going to get back to where Omen is like traditional traps, like the comment about traps and traditional traps, is the idea that traditional traps tend to be gotchas. And what I mean by that is, you as the game master or dungeon master sitting back and you're like rubbing your hands and you're like, ha ha ha, I'm going to catch them with these traps, and you come up with this elaborate mechanical trap that's going to, the floor that tilts to the side and dumps the PCs, or the PCs have to walk a certain path down the floor, or spears shoot out of the wall. Bear traps and pits, and I'm talking about man-made classic Indiana Jones, swing across the pit with spikes, or the ceiling that lowers down with gears, or the walls close in. Yeah, Dead Man's the Home Alone traps. Yeah, the full buckets of paint slamming into the foreheads of the idiot robbers and stuff, slipping on I don't know, ball bearings or something, right? And they're okay, let's put it this way. There's nothing wrong with them, but they are of a singular nature, right? So the problem is that when players go into the dungeon and there's lots of traps, in many ways, like a puzzle with one answer, a lot of times it's if you roll and fail, you're done. Okay. Um, roll to see if you see the single stone that if you step on it, flames will shoot out the wall. Oh, you missed. Okay, flames shoot out the wall, and there's no dynamic um, encounter with the trap. It either goes off or it doesn't. And so if it doesn't go off, it's like you get the game show, loser music, right? It's like boom 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 boom. Because as a dungeon master, you're like, darn, they went through my traps. That means my adventure sucks. And the players are like, yay, I get to avoid the trap. Or it works the opposite way. Trap goes off, dungeon master's happy, PCs are pissed off. To me, it's like a pass fail, and I don't like pass fails. I like things to flow and ebb and be dynamic. And if in a volcanic region, let's take a floor with a number of hidden pit traps, and then you take ground with steam and gases pouring out of it, and then gouts of flames shooting up. For me, the idea of the player characters navigating the ground because they know what's ahead, like navigating open ground like a minefield, I think is far more interesting than avoiding pit traps because, again, the environment is there to be used and abused. Does that mean one of the player characters can lead enemies into this area? Of course. Could they do the same thing in a dungeon with pit traps? Yes, but that's not often the case, right? And sometimes people consider traps to be resource draining, right? Well, what's the point in having the pit traps? Well, it's there just to cause a resource drain, as opposed to the trap telling the story of the region in which they are, telling the story of your setting, um, being something that is important into the world that you are in. So, for example, um, a volcanic hellscape of blasted land might be telling the story of the incursion of the demons and devils in your world. And as this environment spreads, it's telling the story. It's leading the players along a pathway that they understand that as this spreads, it means that they're failing in their mission. They understand that the dangers are spreading in the world. It is telling the story of your world. Falling in a pit trap with spikes at the bottom and then helping somebody out of that pit trap, it tells a very singular, very narrow story. There's a pit trap. Great. Okay, we get past it. Now what's in the next room? And it's like it's one and done, right? It's binge-worthy Netflix versus weekly, HBO television, right? It's like, oh, let's binge the traps, okay, and then they're forgotten, as opposed to those traps telling a story. Now, can you tell a story with traditional traps? Yes, you can tell a story with that, but how often does a pit trap um, become memorable? The first time, sure. Second and third time, it starts to lose its value. By pit trap number 87, it's like the PCs are rolling their eyes and they're looking at their phones, as they play their whatever game is on their phone, right? Whereas in a realm of volcanic activity, as an example, because that's what we're talking about, the PCs can revisit those regions. The landscape can change, and you can tell different stories as um, adversaries or people who are counter to the PC's mission try to go into this realm, and so now they need to follow some bandits that have also landed on the island, where the island is also has volcanic activity, and now the PCs they were fully ready to leave, and now they're like, oh no, they're probably going to go get the MacGuffin that we decided to leave here, and then now the PCs have to go back into it, and again, the environment telling the story. So a fat ninja going on there. Now, flowing more into a narrative, well, remain on the mechanical part. So we have static areas, we have dynamic ones, where there's also randomized. Uh, you Volcanoes lend themselves to randomized events. Now, as a little bit of a plug with the the cinematic environments, we use a thing called even the odds, and it is a randomized way of something happening in the environment that might randomly affect one or more of the PCs and or the NPCs or monsters. An example, of course, volcanic region, a gout of flame shoots out of the ground, a poison gas blasts, sweeps over the region, flaming rock falls out of the sky. There's anything randomly that might happen. There's an earthquake, and you might the ground may shake beneath your feet as a crevice opens up. And so, evening the odds means everybody just grabs any old die, doesn't matter, and you roll. And you want an even result as opposed to an odd result. Pretty simple, right? You want to even the odds. And it's kind of a play on words too, because the odds of you being in trouble, meaning that if you roll odds, you are in trouble. And so therefore, let's say you establish you're going to take 4d6 damage from being blasted by this flaming rock that's falling out of the sky. Before the next round starts, everybody evens the odds, and if everyone who rolled an odd result, you better make that save or to dodge out the way, right? Anyone who got an even result, you're safe wherever you're at. And that might be the choice between the wizard blasting their lightning bolt at the bad guy when they realize that, uh-oh, I might have to move, Now, and random things could be anything. You could attach a random result to undead hands reaching out of the dungeon cages, trying to grapple the PC's ankles or something. It could be tentacles. It could be waves of seawater. It could be avalanches of snow. It could be magical effects, bolts of lightning or whatever. And so those random effects could affect the battlefield, and they could literally randomly affect particular grids or squares, meaning, hey, let's even the odds, and every odd result on the die is okay, it's going to affect these following 6 squares, and if you are located in those locations, it's going to be up to you to move or not move. Now, between randomizing and dynamic, a dynamic thing could be that you specifically say up front, hey, this danger is going to happen. It's up to you to act to avoid that danger. For those who don't know, a lot of wording in Dungeons and Dragons will say, suffer some effect if you end your movement or move through a particular region. So for example, there's a wall of fire, and you'll take damage if you end your movement in the wall of fire or you move through the wall of fire, right? So if you foreshadow, hey, guess what? There's about to be a wall of fire underneath your feet, and it's going to take place on, say, initiative. I use initiative 10 for the natural environment. 20 is usually reserved for layers and layer actions and things. So I said, well, it's a natural environment. It's not under anyone's control. I use initiative 10. But you can say, hey, listen, a crevice is starting to split and crack underneath you. The ice is beginning to crack. The ground is shaking. There's debris coming out of the ground. Falling from the sky. There's poisonous gases leaking out of the walls or whatever. It's up to you. Do you want to stand there and suffer the effects, or do you want to move? And the PCs having to choose whether to stay or move might absolutely affect their tactics. Again, using the environment. So a narrow, for example, let's say the PCs have to squeeze through a narrow crevice, but they know that the ground above them is very shaky, and there could be a landslide, all right? And it could be, you foreshadow, listen, if you remain inside of this crevice, you're going to be crushed by the falling rock. So they have to make the decision. All right, does the slow PC wait for the valley to get, the landslide to come through and then climb over the debris, or do we all run through it, or do half of us run through it, or does one person come up with some crazy idea to stop the landslide while everybody slips past, or whatever the case might be. We've seen that classically done. Door gets ready to slide shut. PC goes and does something to keep the door wedged open. A number of people slide through the ready to slam shut door, and very strong or PC tries to wedge the door open, and then everyone jumps to it and the door slams shut, right? Um, Very dynamic encounter. Lastly, talking, I know I'm being quite professor-like in my descriptions. All right, the last one I will say, and there's others, but this last one I'm going to say is escalation. Escalation is a tool that we can use in our toolbox as well. We've got dynamic, random, static. We have escalation. Okay, and escalation is the classic idea of, okay, we're being pelted by little rocks of flaming embers, but the volcano's ready to explode. We need to get the hell out of here because it's getting worse, right? Yes, there's little rivers of lava, and it's no big deal. We can just step and walk away, and it's warm, sure, but whatever. No big deal. I'm not going to step into lava, but maybe the lava starts flowing faster and faster. Maybe the ground starts shaking more and more. Maybe the gouts of flame ripping out of the ground from the cracks in the ground become worse. And escalation is a thing that you can add as well. Maybe the first round you just describe it narratively. Okay, just you see little flames licking beneath the boots of the soles of your boots as the ground cracks and shakes and a tree falls over in the distance or something. And then measured in hours, minutes, rounds, seconds, it starts to get worse. Hey, guess what? If you stay here, you're going to start taking flame damage. And let's make it a 1d6, right? Okay, next round, the flames start shooting up 20 feet in the air. You're going to take 2d6. All right, it starts to get worse. The lava starts flowing down the mountainside. Hey, if you stay in this particular location, you can take 3d6, 4d6, 5d6. And so escalating danger is a thing that you can add into a particular room, region, location, or whatever to kind of get your point across. And mind you, again, you could reskin it as anything. It could be something life-draining that's necrotic. It could be a flooding chamber and it's filling with water. It could be acid that is flowing down a river. It could be noxious fumes that are getting worse and worse. It could be anything that is escalating. And even the ability for the players to roll their skills or attributes to avoid it could be escalating. So the ability to avoid the danger might get harder and harder. I always bring up the first Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, Mordor adventure. So long story short, the adventurers are running through the deep caverns of Mordor, vacated by the dwarves, and they run down the steps. Of course, the steps have no hand railings because it's, it is what it is, right? It's because maybe dwarves just have a hard time making handrails. I pick because they're dwarves, they don't care, right? But the point being is that, oh, let's run down the steps and escape the enemy. And then they see cracks in the steps. And the first crack is not very wide, but as they go down the steps, the cracks get wider and wider. The dangers increase by having, I guess it's javelins or crossbow bolts or something launched at them. And then, of course, the steps start to crumble and start to swing back and forth, i.e. it's getting worse and worse. And so escalation dangers are a thing. So I've gone on about a half an hour about the mechanical effects. Let's get into some of the fun stuff. Sorry, I had to put on my professor hat today, talking about the third pillar of gaming and what the hell does that even mean. So let's get into some of the narrative parts because I could see some of you asleep on your keyboards. Let's get into some narrative. So a lot of the narrative effects of using volcanic regions is not just simply a big mountain and lava being spewed out the top of it. There's a lot of effects before you even get close to the volcanic region. Um, as Tesla Ranger put into the Discord over at Fantasy Grounds College, if you take a look at some of the preparations in volcanic safety and stuff, when you start looking through them, you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. For example, before you get to the volcano, there might be, I don't know, mounds of ash that have fallen like snow, like gray, blackened snow. And there might be dangers hiding underneath the ash. There could be, like traditional snow, maybe you're leaving footprints in it. Maybe there are creatures adapted to the region. So instead of your burrowing creatures or your say aquatic creatures, maybe you've reskinned them. So instead of like an alligator hanging out in a swamp, maybe there's some kind of volcanic reskinned creature that swims beneath the ashen fields, and tries to pull PCs down into it. And the danger of that, of course, is you can't see below the ash that's as thick as that's up to your knees or your thighs or something, right? Also, maybe there's high winds that happened in the region. Heat, when warm air temperatures meet cold temperatures, there is a lot of dynamic tension in the air, and that can cause high winds. We've seen that where flames will become like tornadoes, and we've seen that with the extremely high electrical activity that happens in the top of the volcanoes when the ashen ore slip and slides against each other, creating static electricity, i.e. Bolts of arc lightning and lightning bolts and things like that. So the ash itself can become its own danger, i.e. a player character falls prone down into the ash, gets dragged away, and then does anybody see where they went? Maybe they're able to see the motion in the ash, but they don't exactly know what's down there. Maybe tentacles reach up through the ash. Maybe the ash, if disturbed, becomes a choking hazard. So if you walk slowly, you don't disturb the ash fields, but if you run fast or you use a gust of wind or some winged creature comes flying by, maybe the ash gets lifted up and it becomes simply a visual hazard, meaning like you have disadvantage to hit something at range. Maybe some beyond a certain range, things are considered to be unseen / invisible. There are lots of spell and spell-like effects. I've jokingly, I've gotten bad remarks about using the environment to limit and curtail magical abilities, because maybe you're unable to see something or hear something or use your hands to or verbalize to use those special magical abilities, because maybe you're choking on smoke or ash. Maybe you can't see your allies to heal them or to target enemies that are a certain distance away. Maybe your hand got burned because you slipped and fell and put your hand into hot lava, i.e. not able to both use a somatic component and hold up your holy symbol or arcane focus or whatnot, those kind of things. And those are possibilities as well. So you get past the ash, and now you have lava tubes where the lava the furthest away from being expelled will cool, and the surface area will cool, but maybe there's hot lava underneath. So now you have to watch out about walking on the upper surface. Again, walking on that upper surface, like a pit trap, is where if you put 37 pit traps in a dungeon, you're kind of an a-hole. But if there are upwards of 37 opportunities for the PCs to walk across a blackened landscape that might crack beneath their feet and dump them into a flaming lava that's below them, that's actually kind of cool, because it's up to the PCs. Hey, do you want to walk slowly across this the blackened silvery landscape, knowing that a misstep will have you fall in, or do you want to run across it? Now, if you run across it, it'll your chances of getting across it will be faster, but maybe you have, say, disadvantage on avoiding cracking the ground beneath your feet and falling in. But if you take longer, doubling or tripling or quadrupling the amount of time it takes you, maybe you have advantage on finding those dangers. And of course, a PC might go, hey, can I break out my first and second edition 10-foot pole and I want to poke the ground in front of me? And as a game master, dungeon master, like, sure you can, and maybe that's what it takes. Maybe that's the way to solve the puzzle of walking across the land that's about to crack beneath your feet. Again, I talked about there's a difference between, or you can create a difference between lava and fire. Gouts of flame shooting up, okay, maybe that's fire damage. Lava itself is kind of a combination of like an adhesive or a bludgeoning force if it falls out the sky plus heat. So maybe you split the difference. So if a chunk of flaming ore falls out the sky and lands on a PC, instead of doing 4d6 damage, maybe they take 2d6 bludgeoning, 2d6 fire, and adjudicate that on either side. Someone's like, I'm playing a red dragonborn, or a tiefling. I've got resistance to fire. Okay, well, you're only going to take half of the 2d6 fire damage, but the bludgeoning part, yeah, you don't have any resistance against that. You're going to take the full 2d6 of the bludgeoning. It's a little complicated, but with like uh, a die roller or a virtual tabletop or something, pretty easy to do, especially if you do all the hard work up front. Then there's also the idea of you got ash, you got to worry about where you're walking. The adhesive effect of sticking a limb or getting dumped into or thrown into lava is a thing, because this can be there's some people have an issue with the act in Dungeons and Dragons of the push and shove maneuver, where you either knock someone prone or you knock them in a direction 5 feet, right? You knock them away from you 5 feet, and they're like, well, if I just knock them down, they're just going to take their action to stand back up. It's useless. And my answer to that is yes, but, right? It's useless, yes, but where are you doing it? If the environment is a green screen and you're just walking on a flat plane, and sure, you're describing stuff around you, but there is no hazard for falling over, then of course it's that way. But if you're standing on a frozen lake, you're standing on a narrow crevice, you're standing on a rope bridge, you're standing on a narrow rocky band of earth, and there's lava all around you, there is a chance that if you fall over, that your force might crack the very blackened ground beneath you and open up the ground and have a gout of flame pop out at you. Maybe there are rivers of lava and you're trying to circumnavigate it, and if it's a force multiplier, right? That bard might not deal as much damage as that barbarian, hacking and slashing his way through all those hobgoblins. But if the bard kicks the hobgoblin in the chest, knocking them into the lava, the river of lava, it's a force multiplier, right? It's not about the damage, it's about the effectiveness. And it might be extremely effective to say, oh, I don't know, kick the hobgoblin, than it is to try to hack at it twice to kill it, right? And again, using the environment. Kick someone over on a frozen lake, maybe you can't just stand up. Maybe it takes an athletics or probably an acrobatics check or dex check to stand up. If you can't stand up, maybe you continue to fall prone because you are slipping on your hands and feet. That's the idea of using the environment. It's not just for me, it's not just there as eye candy, but it should have an effect. It could be anything it could be something as much as pushing someone. Again, going back to the trap idea. Sure, you can have a trap in a dungeon, and a player character, the rogue, is like, I'm going to trick the hobgoblin, and then when the hobgoblin gets past, I'm going to, make him trip and fall into the spiked pit below me, and therefore causing the idea not only of them taking falling damage, maybe you take spike damage. Now they have to take their action to try to climb out of the pit, and all three of those things added together, force multiplier, right? So, and of course, not only can the PCs do it, the NPCs can do it as well. You know, you get like I don't know, a stone giant or something throwing stones at the PCs, and the PCs are like, I got 180 hit points, whatever. Those stones aren't going to bother me. And then you realize, oh, well, listen, if you get hit by a stone, you're probably going to get knocked off that ledge into the lava. And yeah, you're probably going to get pulled down river, and you're going to keep taking fire damage, and you're going to, flow away from your friends. And yeah, it's pretty difficult to climb your way out because that lava is adhesive. So you start adding it together. And you're like, okay, I got 180, but oh, shoot, I'm probably going to take like 25, 30 points of damage, plus I'm going to have to use, I'm being pulled out of the fight, plus I have to grab my way and climb my way out of the lava, plus, things start to change a little bit, right? And so adding in a dynamic kind of event, and mind you, while we don't have a lot of tools to represent this, if you're using a grid, you can put that danger inside of a specific location so that if the PCs move into or through that particular location on your grid, whether it's a long line or a specific location, something will happen to them, whether it is lava or skeletal hands reaching out of the closed dungeon grates or something like that, right? Kind of cool for the bard to kick the hobgoblin and having the skeletal hands rip the hobgoblin apart while the bard moves on, even though that bard, it does the least amount of damage in the group. So moving on to other things in volcanic regions, you do have to worry about, again, acid, whether they're acid lakes, pools of acid, again, walking over thin ground and breaking through and having acid below you. And having the acid splash on top of you. You might be if you go into caverns, you're going to have to worry about those hazards not just below you, but on the sides of you and above you. So could lava spill down from a crack in the ceiling? Yes. Could lava spill through a crack in the wall? Yes. Could it come from beneath you? Yes. And the same can be said for poisonous gases, flowing muddy water. It could be gouts of flame, any of those things. Again, rock slides getting crushed, again, causing damage to the PCs. But then there's something else that I want to bring up, and I've gotten a little bit of flack for this, which I love, is that attacking, I'm sorry, well, I guess you could say use the word attacking, but causing harm to the player characters through other vectors other than the loss of hit points. And that can be caused through conditions: blinded, deafened, restrained, grappled, unconscious, stunned, exhaustion, etc., poisoned conditions. So stacking conditions can eventually make someone effectively out of the fight, incapacitated, taken out, right? There's also the idea of not just having hit point loss, but the loss of ability scores, loss of strength, constitution, loss of wisdom or charisma, either through harm or draining or something of that nature. There's a loss of movement, which is kind of what exhaustion does, where you start to get tired and you start to lose movement. There is narrative loss, which I love. Narrative loss is the loss of the use of one or both of your hands, a broken arm, a dislocated shoulder, a broken foot, blinded in one eye, something like that, where you have the loss of a weapon or a dropped item, or your shoes burn off and now you're barefoot. These are narrative losses which could lead to other dangers and hazards, which normally we pretty much ignore. Now, a lot of games ignore that idea, like the damage to your equipment, the idea of only having one hand to use when trying to climb or open up a potion or retrieve a two-handed weapon from your pack when you only have one hand. Uh, the idea of, you know, the player character that's like, I have my dagger and my staff ready, plus I'm going to pull out my material components, plus I have my arcane focus held up. And you're just like, wait, what? That, and you're holding onto a rope? And you're climbing up the sheer wall? Like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't, you're gonna have to be more specific on that, right? It's like, yeah, I've got my hand crossbow and my arcane focus and my material components, and I'm gonna use a somatic. You're like, okay, hold on. Wait a minute. Let's open up a book here, because that doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah, it's like, well, maybe I think one or two of these can combine together, but all five? Like, no, that makes zero sense. It's like it's the PC that's like, I've got three attacks. I'm going to attack with my sword, my axe, and my dagger. And you're like, wait, okay, which one are you dropping here? And they're like, what do you mean dropping? Like, is your third arm throwing the dagger? I, it makes no sense, you know. And so that's a kind of a narrative. It's like a narrative positioning where we describe what's happening and then try to come to a some kind of like adjudication as to like what's really happening here, what's going on. You know, how are you explaining yourself? And sure, you're a hero, but are you really that good? You know. um, so yeah, of course, with like a blasted landscape, you have again, I was talking about rock slides and things like that, and not just having damage, but you with things flowing and moving like rock slides or mud or lava flows and things. You could be moved. The idea of not only um, being attacked by something from taking damage or being restrained by being covered by, say, rocks falling from the ceiling. But if something's coming down a mountainside, maybe it moves the PCs. And if you're getting moved on the battlefield, you might get moved away from your target. So the barbarian, who's the frontline individual, maybe next door to the fighter, are fighting the bad guys, and then all of a sudden from the left comes a landslide, and various individuals make or fail their saves or athletics checks or whatever the case may be, however you're adjudicating it or measuring it. Maybe they get moved 10, 20, 30 feet. Maybe they get moved 6 squares out the way or 3 squares out the way, i.e. taking them out of the front of whoever they're competing, combating against. And again, the same effects can happen to your NPCs. And so maybe 3 of the 6 hobgoblins get smothered by the rock, 2 of them getting pushed 30 feet away to the west or something, and then 2 of the PCs get covered, 1 of the PCs gets shoved over to the west, and now all of a sudden there's this dynamic change in the attack, and the wizard was like, oh, I was going to catch everybody in my spell, but oh, now everything's moved around, damn it. You know, again, trying to make that choice. And not everything needs to be either positive or negative. It can be combinations of both. An example would be PC Bard. I'm picking on the Bards because there's a love-hate relationship with them. So the chaotic neutral Bard halfling gets covered in the falling debris, and yes, they are restrained and trapped, but maybe they also have 3/4 cover from, say, fire damage that's happening in and around them. You know, they could literally have cover from the attacks from the enemies, as the hobgoblins that have lived up in these mountain regions covered in ash, and they're I don't know, they're using weapons taken from, I don't know, insects, and those are the kind of like short swords they're using or whatever. I'm just making up something, pulling it out of my ass. But you get my point, where okay, there's a landslide. Oh no, we need to watch out. Maybe that landslide also acts as cover, and you're like, really? Yeah, can my wizard get behind that landslide? Sure. And then the chaotic neutral Bard halfling is screaming like, are you going to pull my PC out of this stuff? Give me the help action. Pull me the hell out of here. And we're just like, shut the hell up. I never liked your chaotic neutral character anyway, as they start blasting some lightning bolts at enemies behind cover, right? So as the environment changes, it can be used and abused. And sometimes, here's the fearful part. Sometimes, just sometimes, the players will surprise you. I like being surprised. I understand some people don't like surprises. Maybe they're new to it, or they like to know exactly what's going to happen. But if you if your environment is like your big bad, you know what their purpose is, you know what their motivation is, it's not going to surprise you, right? If you know why the dragon is suddenly attacking the countryside and flying, the red dragon, once again, spreads its wings off the top of the volcano and goes flying. And if you know why they're doing it, you're not going to be surprised when the PCs try to parlay with the dragon instead of attacking it, when they try to sneak into the dragon's lair instead of attacking it head on, when they try to deceive the dragon or come to it with bribes or something. You know what the dragon wants. The same is said for the environment. Yes, the environment doesn't have a personality, but if you know your location, if you know it's a storm-tossed region in the with high waves and salty brine splashing 30 feet high against the seaside docks or something. If you know your location is in a volcanic region with rivers of lava and poisonous gases and gouts of flame and debris falling from the sky, then you know the results of that. You know what? After a landslide, would there be cover? I didn't think about it, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Could the barbarian pick up a um, a a big giant rock and use it as an improvised weapon? And instead of reading the first paragraph where improvised weapon does a die 4 damage, but it acts as a two-handed weapon, and you go, you know what? It makes a lot of sense for the barbarian to pick up a big ass rock and use it to smash someone's head in. You know what? I'll give you a D10 or a D12 on it. It makes sense. You're probably going to crush the rock, but it'll probably shatter after you crush their head. But sure. And you're like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, can I cause a landslide if I fire my lightning bolt at that spot up above us just right? I hadn't thought about that. You know what? Make an Arcana check to see if you aim at the specific part, or make an intelligence check or something. Okay, Ranger's like, hey, my character has grown up in this region. Can I give him the help action and point to where he should shoot that lightning bolt? Hadn't thought about that. That makes a lot of sense. Go ahead and make that roll with advantage. See if you can, smother the 37 hobgoblins that are coming at you. Or whatever, where the barbarian's like, oh, I was going to slaughter them myself. That kind of thing, right? So, yes, guys, the environment itself is its own character, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And again, you can start stacking things. Smoke turns to poison gas. Poison gases, or people are choking. Now the land starts to shake and rattle like an earthquake. And then we also have flowing lava. We got to watch out for that. And okay, enemies are starting to pin us down. Now we need to travel inside the volcano to destroy the MacGuffin and throw it into the volcanic interior. Maybe it's dangerous to crawl through tight or squeeze through narrow locations into the very pits of this volcano, but maybe it helps you out because the red dragon can't reach you with its tail or claws because it can barely fit its own body in there. But maybe it's more dangerous because it can breathe its fire into that crevice, and maybe the PCs allow the red dragon to reach its claw to try to get at the chaotic neutral bard halfling that nobody likes. But then we trap the red dragon's claw inside of the narrow crevice by causing it to collapse in on itself or something. Again, using and abusing the environment, which would not be possible if that environment there did not exist in the first place, right? The idea of the PCs being panicked because a gout of flame might shoot at them from a red dragon because they're in a narrow space wouldn't happen if the narrow space didn't exist. The idea of causing an avalanche wouldn't happen if you didn't describe that particular hazard happening. And of course, since it is our environment and we're using it, Could it only cover a single square on your battle map of like 5 foot square? Sure. Got a flame shooting out the ground, no big deal. Could it cover 8 miles of poison gas and smoke and steam? Same thing there. Sure, you can make it last as long as you want. You don't need to explain, especially using the natural environment. Could it cover that kind of area? Yes. As a matter of fact, in our own world, ash can travel hundreds of miles. Earthquakes are felt for hundreds of miles. The mountainside blowing, a volcano erupting and blowing the side of a mountain, have the force of an atomic weapon explosion if need be, right? And that's up to you, and that it depends on how much you want to turn the dials up and down on your world. So anyway, guys, we've hit the hour mark. I got to put my professor hat on today. Uh, you're able to wake up from your keyboards. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Tomorrow is Future Friday. We will continue our talk about volcanoes on Future Friday, and yes, we will be talking about places such as Venus and the surface of Mercury and the extra stellar places where volcanic activity happens. We will talk post-apocalypse and post-apocalyptic settings in the far future, and dealing, of course, with technologies and things of that nature that will help us survive in those regions. So anyway, thank you for tuning into RP2DBJ. I, of course, am your host. I'm a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. Fantasy Grounds College has allowed me to hang out in the boiler room with them, so I really appreciate that. And we go live Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please try to figure out what time that is if you want to participate live. And of course, we simulcast over on Twitch as well, and we will be having episodes uploaded to SoundCloud if you prefer to listen to this as a podcast. So anyway, guys, have a great one. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.